Do you know Photoshop? If so, you may know Content-Aware Fill. Takes an unwanted object and removes it from a scene, or extends a photo in either direction. It's kinda magic, but do you really know how it works? Wanna? Then keep watching. Alright, so allow me to show you the various ways, compare and contrast the various ways to apply Content-Aware Fill at the present time inside Photoshop. Now, notice that instead of working with a figure in a forest or a cloudy sky or any other continuous tone photograph, I am looking at a kind of schematic illustration here. So we have this grid in the foreground that goes from right to left, the gradient. Notice we have a gradient here that goes from right to left, from purple to a kind of teal in the middle to orange. I'll be echoing that information in the future. And then notice we have this ovoid that I created using the Sphereize filter, for what it's worth, with this outer glow around the outside. This is all a flat image at this point. However, that's how I created it in the first place. And then the grid is kind of warped, as you can see. And then the gradient this time is going from green over here on the right through yellow and orange to red, and then through kind of these pinkish purples to blue. So there it is. Anyway, let's say the first form of Content-Aware Fill is associated, the first one I'm going to show you anyway, is associated with the crop tool. It's quite primitive, it's old school, and it's not the oldest feature on earth. It's just an old school version of Content-Aware Fill. And the idea is if you want to make an image wider or taller, then Photoshop will fill in that new stuff with the old stuff. It'll try to mimic what was going on so that it looks like a natural extension of your photograph. All right, so what I'm going to do here is switch to the crop tool by pressing, I could press the C key if I wanted to. And then I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can do this in one continuous operation here. I want to extend both the top and the bottom by the same amount. So I'll press the Alt key or the Option key as I drag, like so. And I want the height value to be 1300 pixels exactly. Why? It looks good on screen, and I want to be able to duplicate that maneuver in just a moment. And now I'll Alt or Option drag the right handle, in my case, until I get a width value of 2012 pixels, like so. All right, now notice up here in the options bar, delete crop, two checkboxes. Delete crop pixels, which will delete, it doesn't do anything in this case because after all, we're making the canvas larger, not smaller, so don't worry about that one. Generally leave it off though. And then content aware. We want that on, and that will go ahead and Content-Aware Fill areas outside the original image, just like that tooltip said. So it'll fill in all this transparent area, which is amazing because there are now more transparent pixels than there are opaque ones inside this image. And so I'll press the Enter key in order to apply that modification. You will see a progress bar because Photoshop is applying Content-Aware Fill, at which point we have this mess right here, right? I mean, I think it is pretty messy, but let's focus on the negative first and then the positive. On the negative side, the grid's kind of a mess, right? It's every square in this grid is 24 by 24 pixels exactly. Now the new ones aren't really gridded anymore. They're kind of falling apart, and that's due to the natural, the nature of Content-Aware Fill. It doesn't want to rigorously clone pixels. It needs to sort of organically morph them as it builds them, as you can see right here. But it does end up repeating some details that are pretty obvious, like this bottom right region of the ovoid and the top right region as well. So it makes that mistake. There's a little bit of glow over here and up here as well. But here's the positive. Notice how creative Photoshop got with the gradient. So the gradient starts purple, then it becomes teal on the right, in the middle teal, then goes orange, and then Photoshop continues the gradient from the information inside the oval shape right here. So it goes to red next, then it goes to the pinkish purples, and then it goes over to blue. And then notice that the grid starts going into decline, starts kind of basically mimicking the grid over here in the blue region. So it's a choice. It's not a choice that I have any control over, nor do you when you're using the crop tool, but this is the kind of stuff that will happen now. It's going to be very different with a different sort of image, and it's going to differ a lot from one photograph to another as well. But I just want you to really see what's going on. All right, I'm going to switch over to this image, same as the first, exactly the same image. It's flat as well. I need independent layers this time, so I'll double click on the background, and I'll just go ahead and name this guy Original. And then I'll jump it jump a copy by pressing Control J or Command J on the Mac. So we have 2 copies of this layer. I'll come back to the top one. I'll select the bottom one, so turn off the top one. Notice that. And then I'll extend the canvas, but not using the crop tool. Instead, I'll go to the image menu and choose the canvas size command, which has a keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-C, Command-Option-C on the Mac. You're welcome. I'm the one who came up with that shortcut, and it's built into Photoshop a long, long time ago. Back when they listened to me. Anyway, now notice here inside the canvas size dialog box, I think they still would. I'll go ahead and change the width value to that same thing I just applied, 2012 pixels, which is bigger than it was before. That's why we see the arrows going outward. And then I'll tab to the height value and take it up to 1300 pixels, just like before. Click OK, and we have the same thing we had a moment ago. Now I need to select the transparent pixels. There's different ways to do that, but my favorite is to go over to the Layers panel. Press the Control key or the Command key on the Mac. Notice your cursor becomes a finger when you hover over the thumbnail for the layer. It becomes a finger with a little selection next to it. So Control or Command on the Mac. Don't press Control on the Mac. Press Command. And then click in order to load all the opaque pixels as the selection, that is to say. That's not what we want. We want the opposite of this because we want to select the transparent region. So you go up to the select menu and choose the inverse commands. So just those 2 operations and you've selected all the transparent pixels. If that's not your favorite method, let me know. All right, now I'm going to go up to the edit menu. Back in the olden days, before the content aware fill command, we had the fill command. We still do, of course. Nothing ever leaves Photoshop. And so I'll go ahead and choose it. This was where content aware fill started. This was the beginning of the feature. And so notice contents are set to content aware. As I believe by default, I've gone ahead and turned color adaptation off. The other stuff you don't need to worry about. Then I'll click OK in order to fill those transparent pixels. And we end up with this effect right here. All right, I'm going to press Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect. We now have fully formed duplicates of that elliptical shape. And when I say fully formed, I mean not quite, actually. They're pretty mushed, especially down here at the bottom. But Photoshop is doing its best to kind of mind the gradients. And it does that same thing where it goes from purple to teal to orange. And then following the gradients inside the shape to red to pinkish purple and to blue. And then notice we're just curving all the way up over here on the sides. All right, let's see how that compares to this layer. I'll go ahead and select it, turn it on, turn the other one off for a moment. Press the Control key, Command key on the Mac, click on that thumbnail in order to load that selection, then go up to the select menu and choose the inverse command so that we're selecting the transparent pixels. Now, I will return to that same command, edit, fill. Actually, it's got this stupid keyboard shortcut right here. Here's the good keyboard shortcut that it doesn't show to us. It's Shift Backspace, Shift Delete on the Mac. That's going to bring up the fill dialog box. Content still set to content aware. Color adaptation, let's turn it on. What does it do? It tries to bind the gradient. So it allows for contrast and brightness to adapt for a better match. Let me put that back up there because this is important. Basically, it's going to vary the contrast and brightness automatically. That's what we're giving it permission to do in order to match the colors, better match the colors in the background. So I'll click OK. And we'll see what it comes up with this time around. It's working harder, as you can see here. And we end up with this. We have less of that shape up here at the top. It is pointier as well. And then we have pretty much the same thing down here at the bottom, I think. And we have this nice continuous gradient going on as well. Let's compare the two. So this top guy, once again, is color adapt. I'll just go ahead and call it because that's when I turn it on. And then I'll turn on the bottom one so we can see it as well. This is without color adaptation. This is with. What's the big difference? Well, I want you to see that this purple region right here is pretty flat. There's not too much gradient going on in this region specifically. Whereas if I turn this on, this color adaptation on, you can see that we have some brightness variation. So again, we've allowed, just as I described a moment ago, just as a tooltip told me, that we're allowing Photoshop to vary the brightness and contrast automatically, albeit, but as a result, we might stand a better chance of matching the colors from the original image.
Quick interruption. What you're seeing is Content Aware Now. Want to see Content Aware of the future? Then go to patreon.com/Deke now. And now, back to the present.
All right, now let's compare all this to the improved. It's not that new, but it came along, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. Content aware fill command. So I'll just go ahead and switch over to this guy. Same darn thing. So I'm going to have to double click on it and call it original or something along those lines. I'm going to have to press Control Alt C or Command Option C on the Mac. My favorite way to bring up the canvas size dialog box. Change the width to 2012 and the height to 1300. Press the Enter key. Return key on the Mac, of course, and then control click or command click on the thumbnail for that layer there in the layers panel. And finally, go up to the select menu and choose inverse in order to select the transparent pixels that are wrapped around this diagram. All right, now let's go up to the edit menu, and instead of choosing fill, we're going to choose content aware fill to bring up the gigantic screen consuming content aware fill workspace or whatever it is right here. Now, most of how you use this workspace is pretty obvious, but just in case, notice you've got this brush that has a minus sign in the middle. And so because it has a minus sign, if you paint, you're going to subtract areas that are considered for duplication in the healed image over here on the right-hand side. Notice that it's labeled preview. You don't have to leave it on the side, by the way. You can grab the tab for preview. And if you're working with a horizontal image like I am, you can drag it down to the bottom and drop it into place. And then you have the ability to do this kind of number so that you can see one image on top, the original, and the sort of healed image down below at the bottom. If you want to add in stuff to be duplicated, then you have to press the Alt key. Option key on the Mac. Notice that switches between these two modes, minus and plus. And so when you press and hold the Alt key, Option key on a Mac, you are going to see a little plus sign. If you find yourself adding more than subtracting, then you can switch this guy up here to plus. And then now notice there's a plus sign in the cursor, and then you press the Alt key or the Option key to toggle the behavior. Nifty. Anyway, I switched it to plus, so I'm going to paint this stuff back in. Don't paint too much back in. Don't go painting in this stuff, because if you do that, then Photoshop's going to say, okay, I guess you want to duplicate that, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to ignore you. Interesting. Well, I'm going to Alt drag or Option drag in order to get rid of that. Or you can just, if you just want Photoshop to do its thing, notice that you have these big buttons right here. One of them's auto. So you can switch to custom, which will deselect everything and get mad at you. And then you can switch back to auto and let Photoshop decide what it's going to do. After which point, you can zoom this guy in down here at the bottom is where it is now, if you want to. It's kind of a clumsy zoom. Actually, don't love this workspace, but it is what it is for now. And I'll click OK. Just to go ahead and apply that, and I'll press Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect the image, and look what we have. Is that better than anything we've seen so far? You bet it is. Look at that. It's way better. So this was the Color Adaptation version of the fill command, which is better than that crop tool thing, as you can see right here, whereas this is the best. And wisely, Photoshop has decided to continue the purple to teal to orange gradient instead of mimic the gradient that's inside that oval shape. And by the way, it's doing kind of an interesting job of keeping the grid looking good. We've got a little bit of a kind of shadow effect up here, but still, it's an improvement, is it not? I say yes, it is. And the good news is that it gets even better. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to this version of the image, which I've done a few steps in advance, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do this time around, just because I really want to test Photoshop, I want to make it work even harder. So notice over here in the channels panel, go ahead and bring it up. If you're not seeing that panel, you go to the window menu and you choose the channels command, but don't choose the command if it has a check mark in front of it, because that will make it go away. Anyway, notice right here we have this thing called oval. That is an alpha channel in which I have saved a selection in advance. And what I'm going to do to load that selection is press the Control key, same key as I used with to load a layer, load a selection from the layer. And instead, I'm going to Control click on this alpha channel oval. That would be an option. That would be a command click, you ninny. Command click on the Mac. I was calling myself a ninny, by the way. You're fine. All right, now I'm going to go up to the select menu and choose the inverse command. So that I'm selecting everything outside that oval, as you can see right here. All right, that means I'm going to make Photoshop work harder. And that way we're going to really see what's going on. Okay, so now go up to the edit menu and choose Content Aware Fill once again, because I want to draw your attention to something. No, notice now we have to kind of do something a little differently here. Notice that it's gonna the auto function right here is decided that it doesn't have enough room and it doesn't have enough pixels to work with, enough source pixels, so it's decided to select into the elliptical shape, and as a result, we get just this fascinating thing down here. I don't want that, so notice I've got a minus sign in my cursor, so I'll just manually paint around that oval, by the way, in order to eliminate it as a source. So we're no longer sourcing those pixels. And I do want to emphasize, you do have to have a selection outline going before you use this command. That's why I keep selecting things. All right, down here, let's go ahead and see if we can zoom in a little bit. Let's try 50% and see. Maybe even, let's try 67%. Doesn't look as good as it looks outside Photoshop, but it still gives us an idea of what's going on. What's going on, that is, I'm getting ahead of myself because this is the stuff I want to look at. Fill settings. These are the money features over here. And notice color adaptation. We don't just have a checkbox this time around. We have 4 nebulous settings to choose from. None, default, high, very high. And so what in the world is going on with that? Well, again, if you hover, you'll see a tooltip that's actually very useful. Look at that. In saying allow contrast and brightness to adapt for a better match, good for content with gradual color or texture changes, which is happening in our case. We don't really have texture changes, but we definitely have gradual color changes. And so I want to compare these things to you. So what I'm going to do for you, that is, so what I'm going to do is set this to none. We'll just start with it set to none, like so. And you can kind of see what's going on down here at the bottom in the preview zone. But what I'm going to do is click apply. Notice that you have an OK button, which applies and escapes the dialog box. And then you have an apply button that keeps the workspace open. It's perfect. I don't know if I hear people talking about this nearly enough. It's great for comparing different effects to see which one you like. So just click apply. That's going to apply it inside the upper region as well, because now it has been applied as an independent layer by default. Notice output is set to new layer. That's what you want. That's perfect. You just got to remember that the first new layer, color adaptation, is set to none. The second one, it will be set to default. As soon as I switch to default like so, let the thing update down here. There's a little whirring kind of preview thing, and then click apply. And it goes ahead and applies the new setting. And then I don't think we need to see high. You can see high if you like on your own images. I'm going to go very high. And so I'll go ahead and choose that guy, wait for it to apply. Look at it. There it goes. You can see that it darkens up right there, and click apply again. Now I just created 3 new layers because I clicked the apply button 3 times. And now what I would do, you can click OK, or you could click cancel. You can just cancel out. You're done. But you already created those 3 layers. Notice them over there. So this first guy, right, he's default. No, he's not. He's none. He's none is what he is. So we'll just go ahead and call him none, I suppose. Gnome, he's gnome. And I'll call this guy default. And then actually it's Mome, isn't it? I couldn't reach the N key very well. And then I'll call this guy very high. Shall I? Yes, I will. And I want you to see what's going on now. All right. So I'm not going to deselect the image. I'll just show you none. All right, let's call it none. I can't reach the N key, microphone's in the way. None right there. And you can see that we have really no color adaptation going on. So it's on, Photoshop's not making an attempt to reconcile the gradient very well. And that's what's going to happen in the continuous tone, the photographs as well. Gradual color transitions will not be served well by that feature, by no color adaptation. Whereas details may well be. So you can try that out. Default is going to do a better job. Notice things are smoothed out right in this region, for example. That's what I was looking at, but they're smoothed out over here as well. And now very high is allowed to go crazy. With brightness in particular, notice that it turns the whole darn thing into a vignette. And it does a brilliant job with the colors. Not so much with the details, but you know, that's content aware fill. It's growing up. We're watching it grow up right in front of us. Anyway, but it does just a delightful job with those brightness values. I love it. All right,
Here, you want to try something else? Let's not stop there. I'll just go ahead and click on this original layer right there to make sure it's active. We still have the selection, very important. Go up to the edit menu, choose content aware fill. If this command is ever dimmed, it's probably because you don't have anything selected, or you're working on the wrong layer, or you're working with a smart object, because this command cannot see smart objects. That's a problem, Adobe. That's just straight out a bug. It should be able to see those. All right, same stuff, right? We got to paint away this junk right here because I don't want to duplicate. As much as I love those flying, whatever they are down there, canards, they aren't anything I want. And so, all right, look, color adaptation set to default by default. I'm going to switch it to very high because we liked very high, didn't we? Raise hands. I did in any event. So I'm just going to kind of zoom this guy in. Whoa. This is very, very strange behavior. Anyway, look at these guys right here. Rotation, adaptation, scale, and mirror. I'm not going to demonstrate mirror. You can try out mirror. The idea is that you're allowing Photoshop to flip the details horizontally. And that's great, just horizontally, by the way. And that's great if you have an image with horizontal symmetry. I don't. That's not really what we're dealing with here. But I might want to let Photoshop scale the new pixels. Anything it adds, it can scale every single pixel, every single detail. It can scale differently. And that's great if you have a lot of scale going on, like, a path. Let's say there's a walkway and it's a path and it's got paving stones and every one of the stones is slightly different in scale. Well, then try scale. Now, Photoshop is going to bring up this alert message saying, that using any of these options right here, rotation, adaptation, scale, or mirror, may cause unexpected results. Well, I don't know what about these results so far is something I'd expect. So I think this message is kind of dumb. But anyway, don't show again. Click OK. I guess it's telling you that if you're working on that figure in the forest and one of the trees is going to unexpectedly get bigger. But I'm just going to go ahead and apply that guy. It is going to take longer. Every single additional thing you layer on top of content aware fill is computationally intensive. Notice it's still working on it right there. I'm going to go ahead and click apply in order to apply that guy. And then, because I want to mess around with these other guys as well, but it's going to take a moment. You have to wait until it actually goes ahead and shows it inside this image window. This is a representation of the actual contents of the image up here at the top at this point, and that's because it enjoys the actual title tab. You can see that. Okay, can you see how there's some scaling going on? And the color adaptation is very different this time around. Even though it's still set to very high, it's not super dark over here. We're not seeing a kind of vignette like we did before. Instead, things are getting scaled. And we're seeing, speaking of unintended results, wow, I just updated again. We're seeing some duplication of the outer glow, which I think is really wild. Anyway, I am going to add to this, just throw things at it. I'm going to add medium rotation adaptation. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to hit the apply button right there. So, how am I going to demonstrate this to you if I can't apply? I'll click apply. What will it do? Will it say, okay, fine, I'll just apply it. It'll probably apply once it gets done figuring things out. Yeah, looks like it did. All right, let's try now. Let's try doing rotation adaptation. I'll set it to medium. Notice there's low, medium, high, full. Full means it can rotate in full circles, I presume. But I am going to wait for this guy to figure his thing out. And then, you know what? I'll just get ahead of it. Let's try it. Let's try it, shall we? I'll click apply. And I'm just going to anticipate that Photoshop will apply this modification once it finishes computing it. All right, now... it's still kind of working on it. You can see this little twirly guy down here in the bottom right corner. But I'm going to now try full rotation adaptation. As I said, I'm not going to show off mirror. You can try mirror on your own. You can see how long these things take to apply. So it'd be a waste of both of our times, don't you know? All right, so I've already hit apply. So I could hit cancel, but, I think I'll click OK just to make sure that I'm safe. Because look, I've created 4 layers now. I only did 3 things, I think, right? Well, let's give them a shot, see what happened. I'll go ahead and turn off these 3. Everything's called original right now. This is scale right here. So this is actually, let's compare it to very high without scale. So that's very high color adaptation without scaling. And this is very high color adaptation with scaling. Let's see if this guy's any different. No, he's the same. So I accidentally, I'll just drag this guy into the trash can because I have a selection going. All right, now I'll turn on this guy. So he's rotate, right? I'll write that down. Rotate medium, I believe is what he was. And this guy's scale. So I'll go ahead and give him a name. And so rotate, there's rotate. So scale by itself, there's rotate. This is all very high color adaptation, by the way. And then there's full rotate, rotate full. All right, I want to show you something because I think this is interesting. I'll just go ahead and turn those guys off. Once again, click on this layer to make it active. And I'll go up to the edit menu and choose content aware fill. Kind of makes you want to apply a keyboard shortcut to it, doesn't it? Well, go for it. Here's keyboard shortcuts and you can create your own if you like. I'm going to go ahead and choose that guy. And notice we got the same thing with the, what did I call them? Flying canards? Why did I call them that? Anyway, I'll just go ahead and paint this interior elliptical shape away so that we're just duplicating the background stuff. And I'll go ahead and change color adaptation to very high and I'll turn on scale. Why don't I? And if you've been paying any attention whatsoever, you're looking at this going, Deke, you just did that. In fact, you just did it twice. It's the second time I'm going to call myself a ninny. But here's the thing. I'll go ahead and click OK and Photoshop will do its thing. It's not quite keeping up with me because I'm kind of racing it right now. But we should see in the fullness of time a new layer as we're seeing right here. And I'm just going to call it Scale 2. You might say, why Scale 2, Deke? Look, Scale 1 was different. Every time you apply this command, even I haven't changed the selection outline or the image itself. So not a single pixel or affected pixel is being changed. I'm making the exact same request of Photoshop, and yet these two times I get different results. So perhaps that is what that alert message was about. All right, so one thing I haven't shown you, that's how to get rid of the elliptical shape in the middle, the figure in the forest, as it were. And so I'm going to turn off the Scale 2 layer, and I'm going to turn on the very high layer up there and click on it so that we have all this wonderful detail outside the elliptical shape. And I'll just go ahead and go to the select menu and choose inverse once again so that we're just working with that original selection right there. Now, it may be tempting. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this. I'm just going to tell you because, I want to keep this a little short anyway. It may be tempting to apply feather to the selection outline because we are going to get a sharp edge right here. However, Photoshop expects the sharp edge. If you feather and you create a soft edge, a gradual edge with your selection outline, then you're going to see duplicate pixels in that blurred region, in that feathered region. So don't recommend it. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is go up to the edit menu and once again choose content aware fill. This time it's the inside guy who's selected right there. And I'm just going to, I'm not going to turn on scale because it makes it work too hard. I will set color adaptation to very high though. Let's try that. But I do want to show you something. I'll go ahead and zoom in here and notice that you can see this edge, right? And that is a function of the fact that we have kind of double healed. We healed outside the selection. Now we're healing inside the selection. To get rid of that, to make it look better, turn on sample all layers, which is something you can do. So you can sample from all the visible layers inside of an image, and that gets rid of that line that we saw just a moment ago. And then you can sit there and play with, this is very, well, you know what? I'll start with none. I'll just start with no color adaptation whatsoever, and I'll go ahead and click apply on that guy, and then I'll change it to very high just so we can see the two extremes, and I'll click apply once again. And this time I can afford to be cavalier, so I'll just go ahead and click the cancel button because I know this time around I have two new layers, and one should be called none, like so, and the other should indeed be called very high. And now I'll just go ahead and zoom on in so that we can see this wonderful pattern that Photoshop has created for me, that is, with the help of its current version of the many variations, that is to say, on content-aware fill here inside Photoshop. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Whew, that was a lot. But I have more at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DekeNow. Then go to Deke.com, create a free account, and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Photoshop Now.